respect everyone's time.
Great, okay. So again, welcome. We're really excited to be doing this webinar with our friends at CyberHawaii. This is, I think we've done 5 or 6 of these now, and it's always a great organization to work with, and we're really excited. We have a great panel today also. So I'll turn it over to you, Jill, and we'll get going.
Great. Thank you so much, Craig. Well, good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're logging on from. On behalf of CyberHawaii and Jennifer Sabas, we're very pleased to welcome you to today's webinar on ransomware. You know, Craig, it's hard to believe it's been almost exactly a year since we held our very first webinar with CRI on securing a remote workforce. And now we're actually on webinar number 7. And CyberHawaii is extremely grateful for this partnership that we've been able to build with CRI and the programming and the content that we've really been able to deliver to our members, as well as our public at large here from both the public and private sector in Hawaii. And speaking of partners, we do want to give a big mahalo and shout out to our community partners who have joined with us on this webinar: the Chamber of Commerce of Hawaii, the Hawaii Alliance of Nonprofit Organizations, the Hawaii Business Roundtable, the Hawaii Island Chamber of Commerce, and of course, the Healthcare Association of Hawaii. They've just been essential in helping us to spread the word and get important information out to their members and to our community. So thank you again for always being with us on these webinars. You know, today's topic of ransomware actually came directly from our members as a suggestion. And we know definitely that as we live, work, and play more online, it's just basically been a virtual feeding ground for malicious actors. And every day we go online and we read the news and we hear about new ransomware attacks on big companies, small companies across all industries. And while we know that it can be very scary, it creates, you know, feelings of fear and vulnerability and stress and even shame and isolation to those who might have been attacked. Much like a physical attack, you know, there are things that you can do both to prevent it and to respond to it. So we're very blessed today to have some of Hawaii's leading experts to be able to share tips, insights of what's going on right now, and how you can respond if you're in this situation. So with that, I'd like to turn it back to Craig, and we'll get started on our webinar.
Great, thanks very much, Jill. Vivek, if you could go to the slide, there you go. So today I'm joined by a really distinguished group of people. We have Lisa Derricks and Cyrus Kam from FBI Honolulu's Cyber Squad. We have Sandy Ferrara from the Atlas Insurance Company and Alan Ito from Hawaii Pacific Health. So we as a group are each going to go through a short presentation in the beginning to give you a little bit of background on cyber readiness, how to prevent it, some of the intelligence on new attack methods, the role of insurance in helping to protect you, and then some specific zoom in on ransomware issues in the health industry. We are, after that, going to have a discussion among the panelists on different topics and really want you to feel free to contribute questions that you have at that point. So we're going to try to keep the presentation part to about a half an hour or so. So there's plenty of time for discussion among us and for you to get in with the specific questions that you're interested in. Next slide. So quickly, background on us. Cyber Readiness Institute is a nonprofit. We help bring together global companies to help small businesses really improve their cyber readiness. We develop free content and tools. And today we're featuring ransomware, and we actually developed a ransomware playbook that is used or promoted by the Department of Homeland Security. It's free, it's available to you, and we would welcome you to download that when you get a chance. Next slide. The reason that we can provide you with all this free content is that we have sponsors, and our sponsors are listed here: MasterCard, Microsoft, ExxonMobil, General Motors, and Principal Finance are the key funding sponsors. And with that, we're able then really to not worry about needing to sell services. We're not here to give you things so we can sell you something later. We're here to help. And that's our mission as an organization. Next slide. So I'm going to quickly go over some basic ideas on preventing and responding to ransomware attacks. And the key theme here is that preparation is the key. I always like to use this slide in the last year, And this came out in the New Yorker magazine right after the pandemic started. And as you can see, for health and safety reasons, we'll be transitioning to cybercrime. And boy, has that happened. It's been an enormous increase. And I'll let the people that following me, Lisa and Cyrus, talk to you about that. But there has been a rapid increase in cybercrime and in ransomware attacks. Next. So what is a ransomware attack? So it's a malicious actor or somebody that comes in and holds your data and your systems hostage. And how do they get in? Most often they get in through phishing or unpatched software. So that is what, when we talk about ransomware, that's it. They're holding your systems and data hostage. Next. The prevention side. What we want you to think about as a small business is, one, you need to appoint a cyber leader. And in the program, the free program that we have on our website, we provide resources for that cyber leader. But every company, no matter how small, should have a point person who's responsible for this. And they need to help to make sure you have the right policies in place. They need to be responsible for building awareness in the organization about cyber security, and really to focus on what to do if something happens. And that's often called an incident response plan. And just like you know what to do, sorry about that. Just like you know what to do if there's a fire in your building, everybody should know what to do if there's a ransomware attack. And the issues that you should focus on are 4 things. And these 4 things are going to radically help you prevent problems. Passwords and authentication. You want strong passwords. Software updates. You got to keep your software updated. Phishing. People should know how to spot phishing emails. And finally, removable media and the use of USBs. Those are the 4 issues. Cyber leader, the 4 issues. That's how you're going to help to prevent ransomware attacks. Next. So drilling down into the idea of ransomware a little bit more, there's really 3 stages to this. So 1 is preparation. How do you prepare for it? 2, how do you respond to it? And 3, how do you recover from it? So these really are the key issues that you should be thinking about here. In terms of prepare, the number 1 thing to do is to have backups. If you have backups, and you'll see from the decision tree I'm going to show you, if you have backups, the whole path to recovery is really, really much more straightforward. If you don't have backups of the data, you enter into a maze of confusion and chaos that really, really cause a lot of stress for you. When you're responding to it, again, if you have those tested backups, it's easier to recover. But number 1 thing is to get the infected device off the network. So if in an organization you have multiple devices connected and you see a ransomware attack starting on one, you want to get it off the network as quickly as possible. Recover. Here again, the key things are around resetting user IDs and changing all passwords. And that's a great time. Actually, if you didn't have strong passwords before, you should definitely have strong passwords after. And we at Cyber Readiness Institute, we advocate a 15-character password, and that you can use a passphrase to make it easier to remember. So these are the things that you want to be thinking about. But I got to stress a lot, having the backups is really the most important thing to reduce the possible pain that you have and really to avoid the possibility of having to pay. Let's go to the next slide. Now, Vivek, I want you to, if you can you zoom in on this a little bit, just so we can kind of, because this is what's in the ransomware playbook that I want you all to take a look at. But he's going to try to zoom in on the slide a little bit. If we look at if you go down the left side of this, here we go. Thank you so much. Okay. If you go down the left side, you'll see that prioritizing your data and making sure it's backed up. If you start down this left side, if you have a current backup, if you've tested it, congratulations, you're prepared. The incident occurs, scroll up a little bit. Great job. You've isolate the machine, great job, and you can go directly to recover. You're avoiding all this other things about trying to do real-time backups. You're avoiding the decisions about should we pay, should we not pay. You're going all the way down to recover, where you're at that point resetting user IDs, changing passwords, and reinstalling. So that is how important the backup is. And we talked a little bit about prevention, but part of the preparation is just having those backups that not only are there, but you should have some way where you understand how to access them and to make sure that they're current and that you are able to reinstall from them. So that's what I wanted to cover. I'm now going to pass it over to Lisa and Cyrus, and they're going to talk about what they're seeing from the FBI, and we're really honored to have them with us. So over to you, Cyrus and Lisa.
Hi, I'm Special Agent Cyrus Cam, FBI Honolulu.
I'm computer scientist Lisa Dirks, FBI Honolulu.
Thanks for having us. And we want to share a little bit about FBI's role in combating ransomware. A lot of times people ask, oh, what does the FBI do, right? And we work with federal, state, local, international law enforcement, intelligence partners globally, and we try to track down these bad actors, investigate their networks, and disable their technical abilities, and so we can take them down, right? Bring them to justice ultimately. But our main thing is we want to provide liaison relationships with the community, such as you all. Again, like what Craig said, prevention is the key, and we want to stress that through public and private partnerships. And we can do that by providing resources, training, timely information to y'all before it happens. We want to also increase our investigations efficiency of trying to investigate either the attribution or who's behind it, and decrease the overall cyber threat. And so the ultimate goal is to protect your data and U.S. critical infrastructure. So this slide here, so we want to know attribution, right? We're going to focus on primarily the criminal, the espionage and warfare. So hacktivism, as insider threats, and terrorism, those are threats that we kind of try to look for attribution. We can figure out their motivations, right? We want to know why they're doing what they're doing, and pretty much investigate those types of threats. But today I want to talk about more on the criminal organizations and the nation state actors. So what it comes down to is protecting your data and your money, right? So how much is your data worth, and what are you willing to do to protect that data? So in a criminal organization, obviously it's financially driven. They have business models, right? And I'll talk about ransomware as a service in a little bit. You think, oh, why are ransomware people? Why is ransomware still active, and why is it getting worse? It's because people pay, right? And we want to stress that we don't want to pay the ransom. But Bitcoin, if you look at January 2020 last year, it was $7,300. Today it's over $53,000 per Bitcoin. So you can see how lucrative it could be. And I don't want to share too much numbers, but it's in the hundreds of millions of dollars that, and even billions overall, cybercrime has been, these guys have been profiting. Average ransom, over $100,000 right now. And, these criminal actors could be low-hanging fruit, some guy sitting in their mom's basement, trying to purchase malware, Trojans, and trying to hack somebody's business or whatever, trying to get ransom. But we want to look at also the larger organizations, the organizations that are really organized, sophisticated techniques, and that's they see the bigger dollar by going after larger companies, more computers, more data that they can encrypt, and possibly get more money for it. So that's their motivation. For nation state, it's pretty much about data. Countries want to know what the US is doing. They want to know what our companies are doing. They want to steal this information. They want to steal your proprietary information as a company. They attack various industries, Department of Defense, obviously, military, research and development, critical infrastructure, a lot of healthcare, and we'll talk about that later, right? Towards the end. Pharmaceutical, all these industries and sectors are getting hit because of data. And they'll attack the supply chain too, right? They'll attack your third-party vendors and everybody that's dealing with the US government. They can find information through those. If you go back one slide. So Revol Solino Kibi is I just want to highlight this. Out of probably almost 1,000 ransomwares out there, and not including the variants, this is one that is pretty active. April 2019 till even last week, we're seeing Solidin being active, placing ransomware on people's computers. This is one of the ransomwares that have been used as a service, meaning that the developers of this ransomware has been selling it on the dark web to anybody that will use their service, their ransomware, and they'll not only large criminal organizations, but just like your guy sitting in a mom's basement doing something, right? And so they can customize their exploits, pick their Trojans, malware, whatever, and how they want to deliver it. Sometimes as a service, they'll pay a subscription fee, and they can help these bad actors monitor how their ransomware is doing on their targets. Most of them demand Bitcoin from their or virtual currency from their victims. Victims are told to go to a Tor browser and pay their ransom that way. You can see on the screen on the right, there's like a screenshot of the Solidin, I guess the how much it costs for to pay your ransom. And then these developers get like a 30-40% cut. So they also get money from people using their ransomware. What's unique about this ransomware is it whitelists countries in the Russian, with a Russian keyboard layout. So it detects if you have like a Russian language keyboard layout, it'll kind of terminate the ransomware. So again, like a lot of ransomwares, they exploit software vulnerabilities, 0 days, brute force on RDP. With this pandemic, right? People are doing teleworking, and so they look for open RDP ports and try to hack in that way. One thing about passwords, we see victims with weak passwords. They should be using passphrases. Brute force with like 4 to 8 characters, you can brute force that and crack it in like seconds, as compared to 10 to 14 digit characters, upper lowercase numbers, characters. It exponentially increases the time it takes to hack those. You see phishing emails is the primary way of delivering these ransomwares. People still click on links, still click on attachments. Exploit kits, people go to malicious websites, and they somehow the ransomware gets on their computer through these websites or exploit kits, which like Java, Adobe Flash, Java, tends to hide these malware too. So another thing about this ransomware victims, it varies, right? So depend on the customization of this ransomware. Another thing is it avoids antivirus detection. So please update your antiviruses, malware detections. This virus tends to elevate privileges, steal credentials. It moves laterally, looking for mapped networks, looking for other data to encrypt. It changes the file extensions, and then a lot of them has been trying to exfiltrate the data. If you can think about why would they want to take the data, they can use it to leak it on the dark web, or show that they're gonna extort you, pretty much. And it deletes all your Windows shadow copies and other backups, and including the cloud. So we have victims that their cloud's also been compromised, because they're all connected. So another thing is network segregation, right? You want to make sure your backups are offline once they've been updated, or definitely multiple backups, and maybe even think about encrypting your backup. This ransomware has been known to attack third-party vendors, your supply chain, and your managed service providers. So the people that are remotely looking into your networks, they also are targeted. And again, threatens to release the public data publicly. And in this screenshot on the right, you see that the price doubles after the time ends. And then if not, you don't pay, they threaten to release it publicly. And so I said, how important is your data? Is this something that you can feel free to let go, and it's not as important, but definitely, Lisa, that's it.
Thanks, Cyrus. If you don't mind going to the next slide. So as a computer scientist for the Bureau, a lot of what I do is on the more technical side of the investigation. So I do a lot of the digital forensics and analysis for ransomware. And I'll just run through this stuff pretty quickly here, but some of what we do, and if you guys ever do get infected with ransomware, we're the response to it. We're trying to figure out who, what, where, when, and why. We're not there to clean up systems or anything else, but we are there to hopefully figure out what happened, and maybe even help figure out, if they have something like a persistence mechanism on your system, and we can help figure out and make sure they won't come back. So we do things like ransomware note comparison. Lots of different variants have different notes in different languages, and sometimes we're interested in the Bitcoin addresses. If you know anything about Bitcoin, there's a public ledger for it. So if we can see, you sent the money here, well, where did it go after that? We can do some investigation on the cryptocurrency side of it. We want to look at, the executable that was responsible for it. If that can be found, that, will tell us things like, as Cyrus said with the last piece of ransomware he talked about, it might be looking for Russian keyboard layouts. And that's something we can see and tell if we have that executable. And then finally, we want to also identify the initial infection vector. Like Cyrus said, a lot of times it's things like phishing emails or third-party applications that are downloaded from the web, things like that. But if we can find that, it helps us engage with other people who might be vulnerable, possibly take down some of those infection vectors, and prevent this from happening to other people. And the one note that I do want to say is, Craig mentioned that prevention and preparation is probably is key to ransomware. And a lot of times, if you want to figure out what happened, logs, like turn on logging. If you have the ability to store logs on various network connections and things that are going on your computer, whatever your intrusion detection system is, those logs will help you and will help us if we ever have to come investigate. So thank you, everybody.
Great. Thanks very much, Cyrus and Lisa. So a couple really interesting things that you guys brought up. One is The idea of making sure your backups are offline and not connected, Cyrus, that was a really important point you brought up. And then Lisa, your point about logs, so that you would have some kind of way to trace possibly where the infection came from in the first place, I thought were both great. We're going to go now over to Sandy on insurance coverage, because as a small business, one of the things that you might want to do is to look at how you can mitigate your risk through insurance. And so I'm going to turn it over to Sandy right now.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sandy Ferrer from Atlas Insurance. And I do like that everybody talked about preparation and prevention. And you know, unfortunately, ransomware attacks happen, and to have insurance coverage there in place is going to help protect your organization. If you'll go to the next slide, please. Okay. So here's kind of an example of a claim. An employee opens up an invoice attachment that appears to be, you know, from a normal vendor. And the attachment actually releases a ransomware that immediately spreads to your company machines, including your backup server. As a result, the computer in your organization is rendered useless, and your business operations shut down immediately because you can't access any of your critical systems and applications and data. So this attack actually happened to a mid-sized business on the East Coast, and it crippled their operations and resulted in a loss of $18.2 million in damages. So this is a combination of lost revenue and direct costs to restore its systems. And later in the presentation, I'll go over, you know, some of those costs that are incurred when you do have a ransomware loss. Here's some statistics. These are pretty recent, and 68% of ransomware attacks begin with phishing links. So, you know, employees click on a link that looks to be legitimate, and then the bad actors in the system. And we see this in Hawaii. So it's not just, you know, mainland and other countries, it's happening in Hawaii. Phishing attacks have increased over 600% since the start of COVID-19 pandemic. And this is because everybody's working from home. So, you know, everybody had to do it quickly. You know, the links were insecure. So there's vulnerabilities out there. To these, you know, the hackers are jumping on it. So 2021, a business will fall victim in the future to ransomware every 11 seconds. And then, and like Cyrus had said, you know, he had said the ransomware attacks now are 100,000. It was 5,000 in 2018. So, and they can be as high as $1 million because people pay the ransom because they need to get back to company operations, especially healthcare, which will be talked about next. Next slide, please. So what's happening in the insurance market? So, you know, we're seeing for small businesses that, you know, $1 million policy is still very competitive at $1,000. That's a minimum premium, including cybercrime. It can go up to about $1,500. This is what we call social engineering coverage. So that's when you release to a bad actor who you thought was a vendor funds. Now, if you have any type of losses and you didn't have past insurance, then, you know, even with insurance in place, carriers over the past year, because of these increase in losses, the trending in severity, we're starting to see the premiums increase. There's a lot of carriers writing, but the carriers are now really looking to see that you have in place maybe like MFA. They're all requiring MFA now. You know, what other security measures do you have in place? Like next generation antivirus, you know, blocking out that suspicious activity, and spam filtering. So they really want to know in the underwriting process, how are you protecting your system to prevent a loss? And then the last point is, you know, ransomware limits. right now they've been writing the limits at equal to your policy limit, but we've been seeing that carriers are starting to reduce those limits if you don't have MFA in place, or, you know, or if you've had a loss in the past. So, you know, it's really, again, you know, the quote below is basically, you know, there isn't necessarily an increase in bad actors, it's the lack of protection. And like Cyrus said, they're going to find a loophole and they're going to get into your computer. So next slide, please. So, you know, so what is the cost associated with a ransomware attack, and how can cyber liability coverage protect me? So first off, when you do have a loss, the first thing that's going to happen is you're going to call your insurance carrier or set up a claim. And what they do is they assign you a data response breach coach. And that's basically an attorney. So they're going to oversee that claim. And that cost is about $500 an hour. So it's an attorney. So the cost is going to be high. Next, they're going to do is you're going to have forensic experts come in, and they're going to work with your IT folks to figure out how they got into the system, what information's been breached. So they're going to get in there and start doing their work. And that's outside of what the FBI does. This is the insurance company that's protecting you and figuring out how to best to stop the bad actors in your system and find out where they got, what information they received. So at that time, since we're talking about ransomware, the policy is going to pay ransomware. You know, they're going to, the carrier and the data response breach coach is going to assist you in negotiating payment to get your information back. So they're going to pay that in a cryptocurrency. Most people don't have cryptocurrency on hand, so they're going to front that Bitcoin for you. So they're just going to, that's going to be part of your claim. So next, after they figure out what information's breached, you're going to have to, you're required to notify those people whose information was breached. So there's going to be, they're going to set up a third party vendor that's going to provide those notifications. They're going to offer credit monitoring. And then they're also going to set up a 24-hour hotline for your clients to call somebody to ask questions. So all of this is covered by the insurance policy. Then if there's bad PR, you know, there could be PR that has to be provided in case this, you know, got out to the media. So there's PR protection. And then, you know, if you have to rebuild your data or pay overtime costs to your IT folks, that can be paid by the policy as well. You could suffer a business interruption loss. So your system's down, you know, it could be down for a week, and you could be a retailer or, you know, and you have a loss of income. So there's generally within that policy limit, it's usually equal to or a sub limit, but it's going to pay that interruption loss in extra expense. There's also could be reputational harm. You know, your clients found out that you have a system breach. You know, they may not want to do business with your company for a while until they know that, you know, that you have a secure system. So you're going to have a revenue loss there. And then, you know, there's also wire transfer fraud. So there's a couple ways. There could be fraudulent transfer by the bad actors. They could get into your account and transfer out money. Or there's cyber crime coverage. So, you know, where you fund money to a wrong vendor. So that can be included in the policy. You do have to watch the policy because that's an additional cost for the social engineering. And then defense costs for third party. So basically all of the coverages above were first party. Third party is if you're sued. You know, now you've had a breach, somebody else was infected because of your breach, the policy is going to trigger a third party claim under the policy to defend you for anybody that's suing you for that data breach. And then, like Craig had talked about before, you know, you want to be prepared ahead of time in the case an incident occurs, not at the time. So basically, you know, discuss internally the claims handling with you know, your inside staff, and you know, set up a team. So you want to know from your carrier and your insurance agent at the time that coverage is bound, who's going to handle the claim, who do I need to contact, because time is of the essence to respond to the ransomware. You know, be prepared with that response team and possibly your board. Maybe have some tabletop exercises that you can identify both internally and externally who needs to be involved in the incident occurs. So having all the claims contacts ahead of time, you want to have that ahead of time, and not, you know, when you're trying to figure that out. Because I'm not sure if the FBI had mentioned this, but there is a link as well, and it's on CyberHawaii's site. It's the www.ic3.gov, and maybe they can you know, add some comments here, but it's important to also let them know right away so they can do some of the investigation of a ransomware or maybe a social engineering attack. So you do want to notify them. And then be transparent on the flow of the information and communication, you know, before, not after events. So, you know, I've gone through a lot of these claims. They're all different. And, you know, having a team of people together to work with IT and, you know, keep your agent involved to help you through the process. That's all I have.
Great. Thanks so much, Sandy. That was really interesting. So the thing that you brought up, a couple things that I thought were fascinating. One is around the idea of companies needing to have more in place in order to get a policy, was one thing that you said, that you're looking for more controls that they have in place in order to get a policy. And we're going to come back to this when we go into the discussion. The other thing I thought that was interesting was around the cost, not only of the fine, but also the cost of all the recovery aspects being covered is really a great thing for small companies to keep aware, because even if you're not paying the fine itself, you could still have a lot of cost associated with a ransomware attack in terms of overtime for people to put everything back in place and get your company running again.
Right.
Okay, so now I'm going to turn it over to Alan Ito, and we're going to take a deeper look at ransomware in the health industry. Alan, over to you.
Hey, thanks, Craig. Yeah, so, you know, ransomware has been an issue for healthcare for a number of years now. I think the first publicly announced ransomware attack was with Hollywood Presbyterian Hospital several years ago. And I believe, if I recall correctly, they ended up paying a ransom of about $17,000. You know, and it's evolved since then. So what I want to talk about was a period that started back in, say, the September timeframe of last year, September 2020. So as you can see on this slide here, in early October, in some of the information security publications and news articles, you know, it was basically said that, you know, the past week was not a good week for the healthcare industry because of an increase in ransomware attacks. Of note, the bottom item here on this slide, in Germany, there was a death of a patient who was transported to a hospital that was attacked with ransomware. Their systems were down, so they diverted that patient to another hospital, and they passed away en route to that other hospital. So they were saying that this is the first patient death attributed to ransomware. Next slide, please. So during that period, September, early October, Universal Health Services, which is one of the largest health systems in the US, was hit with ransomware. They were down for a pretty long period of time. Also during this period, we started seeing other health systems being hit with ransomware, and many of them were down for more than just a few days. Next slide, please. Then on October 27th, there was a quickly pulled together call that was arranged. It was a joint call with the FBI, Health and Human Services, and Homeland Security. And basically, the call was to alert the healthcare industry that there appeared to be a concerted ransomware attack against the healthcare and public health sector in the United States. Next slide, please. So what prompted that call that was pulled together was that during a period of 24 hours, they saw 6 ransomware attacks against various healthcare organizations. And basically, in November, they were saying publicly that there were at least 20 known attacks that happened. And since then, the number has just increased. The attackers, I believe it was attributed to an Eastern European hacker group. And, you know, as I said, you know, the attacks are continuing. Next slide, please. So as far as this specific incident of ransomware, from what's known, they used the Ryuk ransomware version, and it was deployed using the TrickBot malware. The initial attack vector, as you know, we've discussed earlier, was via a phishing email, and basically, from what's known, the phishing email included a Google Docs link to a PDF document, and then within the PDF document, you know, you had the link to download the TrickBot malware, which then reached out and then downloaded the ransomware. Next slide, please. So, you know, as we've discussed, you know, the ransomware attackers in this case are known to persist in an organization. So they don't just, in this case, they don't just get in and launch the ransomware. They're doing investigation. They're trying to see where they can do the most damage. They're actually exfiltrating data. I think as Cyrus said, so, you know, after launching the ransomware, they can also threaten to expose the data they've exfiltrated on the dark web. So they have 2 ways that they extort you. And then there was also a lateral movement within health systems. So they get in via, say, one workstation, and then they move laterally to infect other workstations and servers within the organization. From what's known, it was shared that these attackers were planning to attack at least 400 hospitals in the United States. And again, from what's known, they're asking for pretty large ransoms. I've heard $1 million plus ransoms for these attacks. So, yeah, ransomware is, you know, a big issue for healthcare. As you can imagine, in the healthcare industry, patient data is critical to caring for patients, and without that data, you know, it can put a healthcare organization in really a very, very difficult position. So continues to be an issue. And, you know, a lot of the things that we discuss about prevention and preparing for an attack, you know, I think hold especially true in the healthcare industry. But that's all that I had, Craig. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Alan. So we're now going to go into a discussion and question area. And I was going to start it off, Alan, you just said something that prompted my interest. So in the healthcare industry, in other industries, we see that small companies are often used as gateways to get into larger companies for ransomware attacks. Do you find that in the healthcare industry also?
Yeah, what we see in the healthcare industry are instances where, say, a business partner or someone who supports the healthcare organization gets hacked. And we see instances where someone's email gets hacked, and then that hacked email is then used to launch a phishing attack on a healthcare organization. So for the healthcare organization, it's, oh, I know this vendor, I do business with them, I'm getting an email from them, they're asking me to open a document, I'm going to go ahead and open it. So yeah, we do see that.
So let me go over now to Cyrus and Lisa. So, one of the things that we always talk about with companies is that having some kind of incident response plan is important. No matter how simple it is, there should be some plan in place, because when the attack is occurring, it's a really stressful, chaotic situation. In putting an incident response plan together, what are some of the key things that you would recommend? And who should the first line of law enforcement be? Should they go to the local police, go to you? Talk to me a little bit about incident response, Cyrus and Lisa.
So in regards to one of your questions about who you should go to as a first response, it kind of depends on who you maybe have relationships with and who you have contacts with. We would love it if you come to us and, report whatever attacks you're seeing or have seen. But, some energy sector partners, they might first report to DOE versus us, or, DHS versus us. But if you can let us know, it is incredibly important to us. I know a question that Jim put down in the chat was that he's been told by FBI that, if it's less than $10,000 that have been lost, that, there's not a whole lot to do. And he even mentions in there, and Sandy mentioned it too, about ic3.gov. And while, yes, we do not have the capability to, investigate every ransomware attack, we just don't have the personnel and bandwidth to do that. Reporting is incredibly important to us. Even if you have a small monetary loss, or maybe you have no loss at all because you have backups, please report it to IC3. We cannot do our jobs if we don't know what's going on, and we can't be out there monitoring people's systems for them. So please report, even if you don't have a loss or it's very small. If there are 1,000 people who got hit with the same ransomware as you, we can correlate that information based on, whatever you put in the IC3, whether it's, the Bitcoin address or the extension that they use, or, whatever information you can provide in there can give us a way to say, hey, this person lost $10,000. We don't have enough personnel to go investigate that specific case. But if there's 100 people who lost $10,000, we're up to what, 1 million? And that's when we can spawn an investigation. We also, on a side note, we don't release your information. We don't discuss ongoing investigations. Like you've seen in this presentation, we don't talk about victims. To answer Craig's other question about plans and intrusion detection systems, I'd say, that's kind of up to each company to determine. Unfortunately, we can't give too many recommendations. So I can't say that I have a great answer to that one, Craig, but.
Okay.
Well, as far as, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
As far as having a disaster or recovery plan in place is so important, part of the preparation. We've seen victims go through this and not have a plan. They have IT people that have not tested their backups. Just all these things should be in place prior to this happening. So part of the plan is having the who to call during the time of the incidents. Do you have IT on hand? If you're a small company, do you have a vendor that can look at your network? If you just call them right away, because the time is ticking, right? Once the ransomware is launched in your network. So definitely preparation is key.
That's a great point, is knowing who to call. And depending on the size of your organization, you should have somebody appointed to call possibly law enforcement, your insurance company, of course, your IT consultants if you use them, but also the other stakeholders you deal with, right? You might want to be calling customers or suppliers or other people you're connected to just to let them know to try to contain it as much as possible. And knowing who's going to do what ahead of the time makes a big difference. Let me go over to Sandy. And Sandy, one of the things I was going to ask you is, and it's kind of a hard question, is how do you value the data that a company has in a policy? So like one extreme, the Coca-Cola formula is worth a lot of money. How would you value a certain type of data that a company would have? Is there a rule of thumb for it for small businesses?
Well, yeah, I mean, it comes down to the information you have on file, whether it's employee information or client data. So you have to protect that information, you know, whether it's your own or somebody else's. So it's information that people want, and it's highly valuable. So so there has to be protocols in place to protect that data, and if not, you know, each state has different requirements for what's personal information. You can look up Hawaii. It's basically name, address, it can be social security number or driver's license number, where another state might just be the name and address. So knowing what personal information, you know, PHI is important to know as well, and how to keep that protected. I hope that answered your question.
Well, to an extent,
Yeah.
but if I had, like, if I was a business and I lost information on 1,000 customers, is there a rule of thumb as to how much that is worth in terms of what kind of money I would get back for my policy?
Not necessarily. That would be the third party lawsuit that would have to determine that, and what that other person feels that information was worth, and how much it cost them as a result of you losing it. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, great. So, and we had a question from the start, so I want to be take a look at this, and it came in right at the beginning of the session from Dabo. And this is a question that probably Alan, I would probably turn over to Alan or Lisa first. If you see this in the chat, if you guys want to take a first crack at this question.
Let's see. So what is the question?
It's kind of long to read. Can you see it in your chat?
From Davo.
If you scroll up, it came in right at
Or it's in the chat, not in the question and answer.
right. It's in the chat.
Okay.
Because that did come in right when we first started. So I do want to try to be responsive.
Okay. Having users at the office behind the firewall, is that the one?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Safest recovery strategy. Yeah, so let's see, from a recoveries, I mean, what you want to do, even with something like OneDrive, you want to isolate the user, and you want to isolate, you know, the drive. I think further down, they talk about limiting map drives, you know, so you want to be sure you do that, have a way to isolate the source of the attack once you can identify that, and then try to limit any spread, you know, so you want to, you know, disconnect the workstation if you can isolate, you know, where that is. And then also look at any drives, OneDrive, anything that might be mapped to that workstation.
Okay. And Jim, I see that you had wondered if we would be opening up to Q&A. And we did address your earlier question in the chat. Do you have any other questions, Jim? I don't know if he's still here. He might have left. Any other questions? Let me see other questions that have come in. List of information who we would contact or phone number if we have a breach is something that came in from somebody. Generally, that's something that would be specific to you. So on that list would typically need to be any outside IT consultant that you use or managed service provider, your cloud service provider, your insurance company. We also do recommend that you know who you would contact related to law enforcement, whether it be the FBI or the website that was mentioned here. So those would be the list of some of the people that we would want you to have in an incident response plan. Anybody on the panel have any other ideas on kind of who you'd want to have on your quick call list if you had a ransomware attack?
Yeah, Craig, one of the things that all businesses should be aware of is the communication also. If you have an attack, if you have internal communications department, or if you're using a third party to coordinate your communications, you want to alert them, because you want to be able to be sure that the communications of what's happened doesn't get out of control. From a reputational standpoint, that could also have a pretty big negative impact on the organization.
Great. And we have time for one more question here. Somebody asked, how do the hackers determine the ransom price? Is it based off of how much data has been encrypted in the attack? Anybody want to take that on? Either that's probably more for Sandy or Lisa or Cyrus. Any idea on how they pick a ransom price?
I don't exactly know, but I can only say that when the bad actors do their reconnaissance, they know what kind of money your company's making, who's working at the company, how valuable the type of information is. And so I can only assume that based on how important or how close to money-wise, if they're financially driven, they will increase their ransom.
Yep, I think Cyrus hit it. A lot of these guys do recon, trying to figure out how many employees you might have, assets, things like that. It sounds like Sandy might be trying to jump in there.
Oh, no, no, maybe it was Alan.
Okay. Well, we only have a minute left. Anybody that had questions that we didn't get to, please feel free to email it. I'm going to turn it back over to Jill. She's going to talk about the follow-up, and that we're going to be distributing the recording and also links to certainly to our ransomware guide and other materials. Jill, back over to you.
Yes, thank you, Craig. And a big mahalo to our panelists, to all of our participants for submitting their questions. This has been a wealth of information and a very great dialogue in terms of how you can best be ready and anticipate the threats that are coming at us. So as Craig mentioned, we will be again sending out to our email list and also including on our website a recording of today's webinar. Will also include a link to Cyber Readiness Institute's ransomware playbook. And we'll be working with the panel members as well to see if we can't get copies of their presentation to also include there. It was very informative, every single one of them. So we'll make sure that going forward, you continue to have these resources available. But just appreciate all of you coming together on a Friday morning to really think about how we're going to best prepare and protect ourselves against these kinds of threats. So thank you, Craig.
Great. Thanks so much, Jill. Thanks to the panelists. You all did a great job, and it's always a pleasure to do these with CyberHawaii. Take care. Have a great weekend, everybody.
You too.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.